Before I get into this episode, I just wanted to plug Metro Podcasts, which is where we are hosting all of the podcasts this week in New York City. I'm also interviewing the founder on a future episode, and I love that it's a woman-founded company. Obviously, podcasting has been and continues to be such a big part of the entrepreneurship and startup world. So if you go to the show notes, I will also plug where to book your own studio if you're filming in New York City. So I've got a phenomenal founder in the building today. I have her cookbook on the table. Dana Pollack is the CEO and founder of Dana's Bakery. And what's really cool actually about today in particular having you in is that all over the news, a company called Foxtrot just closed down out of the blue. I lived in Austin for about 4 years and was very familiar with it there up until I left. And so this was all over the news today in particular, and it's more in the CPG space, but right. You've done so much throughout your career. So I definitely want to get into your personal opinion as a food founder further into this episode. But for those who don't know, Dana's Bakery is one of the first D2C companies out there with this particular product. And it's different for those who also know of companies like Baked by Melissa, which is more of a cupcake company. Obviously, she's got stores in New York. You have built this incredible company without even necessarily having stores over the world.
Thank you.
So walk me back to the beginning. I know you also used to intern at Food 52,
right.
But I want you
Love Food 52.
You share the story.
Sure. So my story is a bit of a career changer story. I used to be the photo editor at Muscle and Fitness magazine. So it was all about Speedos and body oil and photos, which was my life. And I just was not happy. So I said, what makes me happy? What would I want to do every day if this isn't it? And I had always loved food. I'd always loved thinking outside the box and making my own creations. And I thought, let me try food. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew myself. And if I didn't go to culinary school, get proper training, and get out of the house, I would end up just watching TV. And, I wasn't really sure that I was going to get to wherever it was that I wanted to go. So I quit my job. I went to culinary school. And when I was in school, I fell in love with French macarons. By the way, I say macaroon, not macaron, because I'm from New Jersey and I don't speak French. So everyone always asks me that. But as long as you spell it with one O, we were talking about the same thing. So I fell in love with French macaroons when I was in school, but I saw that, and this was in 2012. No one was making them except for a couple of cafes had them in New York City, and they were all the same French flavors. It was lavender, rose, pistachio, and that's just not my thing. Me loving food and loving cake and always baking and entertaining and baking for people, I thought, why aren't people making these amazing desserts in flavors that we love and grew up eating? So that's how the concept of Dana's Bakery was born. While I was in school, I started to work on the business because I figured out what I wanted to do. I had worked in restaurants while in school, so I the Libra in me, I kind of burn the candle at both ends. I'm always trying to find my balance. And when I was in school, I was working in restaurants, so it was 24/7. I was fully immersed into the culture, and I quickly realized that working in restaurants wasn't for me. It just wasn't, and I have a lot of friends that stayed in restaurants, and they're still there, and they're very happy. But for me, I kind of wanted to be more creative. I guess that's the photo editor in me. So that's how the concept of Dana's Bakery was born. I said, I want to make these, but in flavors that I actually love and eat on a regular basis, like red velvet and birthday cake. And so that's kind of how it started. When I was in school, I started to develop my own recipes. And because of my background in photo, I took all my own photos, and we put a website up because I had no partners, no investors, and I had no idea if it was going to stick or not.
How old were you?
I had just turned 30. It's funny, I always tell people 30 was the most magical time for me. At 30, I quit my job, I broke up with my boyfriend, I enrolled in culinary school, and then I met my now husband all within a month.
Love.
Yeah, so it happened right when I turned 30. Okay. And it was the best thing that ever happened. to me.
When your publicist pitched me on you and it came up in the subject line Dana's Bakery, I was just like, oh my God, Dana's Bakery, because I used to live in New York way back in the day, and I remember when you were in Dylan's Candy Bar, and I remember also having traveled because my mom is originally from London when I was growing up, and macarons. It's not what people think. It's not that coconut
The
dessert.
Passover, right?
Yes.
Happy Passover, by the way.
Yes, same.
It is not the coconut Passover macaroon, which I personally am not a fan
Me
of,
either.
unless it's like doused in chocolate.
Yeah.
It is the French meringue
Yeah.
cookie, and they're very fickle, hard to make, and they deserve a lot of love and attention. But when you do it right, you do it right.
And it's super cool that there's also the spin on it with the different flavors.
Right.
Because that's not super common.
Well, now it is, but
Now,
back
yes.
then we were really one of the first. So that was our calling card. And because of social media and my background in photo, on Instagram, I posted what we were doing under Dana's Bakery, which no one had heard of. We didn't have a storefront. Everything was online because I didn't have investment and I didn't have the backing to have a commissary or have a storefront in New York City because it's really expensive. So I just started online. A friend of mine built my website and helped me create my brand. And I just started posting pictures on the internet, and then people saw what we were doing and they wanted to try them. So at first I was delivering them by hand. Like friends and family would order, and I would spend more money on a cab delivering the product than I was making at the time. But then because of social media, which is free, by the way, and I always tell people when you want to start your business, the best way to get out there is just to use your free, your resources and your tools. Because of Instagram and social media, even if someone didn't know what a macaroon was, they saw it was really pretty. They knew the flavor profile. They knew they liked red velvet. So what's this dessert that looks gorgeous and this really cool photography, this photograph of it? I want to try it. People started to ask me, do you ship? Do you ship? And then I had to figure out the logistics of shipping.
Which is a whole other
So it was
beast.
all organic. And I always like to say that because of my first life, my background in photo, it really helped Dana's Bakery because the brand and what we do, when you're online, people have to buy with their eyes. You walk into a store, you smell what you're about to buy. But when you're an online bakery, you buy with your eyeballs. You can't smell anything. You could be on a subway. Everyone's on their phone right now. Everything is mobile. Majority of people are purchasing things on their phone. So you really have to sell it with your eyes. And that was something that I had to learn way back when, before online shopping was really a thing.
And this was what year?
This was 2012.
So this is even pre-TikTok. I mean, it's
yeah. TikTok, really blew up peak COVID. And that was, TikTok is great and going viral is great. And we love TikTok, and for a lot of different reasons. I think a lot of small businesses and independent creators who are selling things on the internet love TikTok. But this is before any of that, even before Instagram Shop.
I take a lot of pride in interviewing founders who achieved success pre-social media, because I talk to so many now people who are like, I hate social media, so I'm never going to start a company, or I don't want to be on TikTok, so I'm not going to start. And so it's so refreshing to have convos with founders who are like, you can do it.
You can do it.
I did it. So I love that. But Food 52 was before this Muscle magazine or after?
So Muscle magazine was the last magazine that I worked at before I quit my job and went to culinary school. I went to ICE, Institute of Culinary Education.
You guys, for some reason, when I walked in, I thought ICE was like where you're detained.
Yeah, no, totally different. Very different. I went to ICE for the baking and pastry arts program. So I didn't do the full culinary stint because I wanted all of my modules to be centered around dessert. When you did the full program, it was great because you learned knife skills and you learned how to flambe and you learned how to actually cook savory, but you only had 3 dessert sections. And I wanted to just dive in. Like, dessert was my thing. Now I cook all the time, and when time allows it, I would love to go back and get formal training because I do cook all the time and I love anything food. But, I went for dessert. So.
Do you remember when you first tried a macaroon?
Yeah.
Do you remember what that was like for you?
I do. So I remember, people either didn't know what they were or they were fanatics. They were obsessed with it. And for me, anything with like an aesthetic, anything that's really pretty, I loved the way that they looked. And we made them in school, and we made vanilla. But it was just such an interesting texture. And I love, talking to people about macaroons because it's not just like a regular cookie. It's two shells that are sandwiched with a very specific type of filling, whether it's a ganache or it's a jam or it's buttercream, whatever it is. But what happens with a macaroon is you're never supposed to eat it the day you make it, because when you make it, there's two shells and a filling. But if it sits in the fridge overnight, and osmosis happens and that filling softens up the top and the bottom shell, and it gives the macaroon this really unique texture and consistency that is very specific to a macaroon, where you have a harder outside shell, but then the inside is just this one really just decadent, I don't know how to describe it. Like you have them there, you just bite it. It's just very specific texture.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I also have had macaroons from La Durée, which are frozen like they're frozen macaroons, but they seem like they're made fresh day of.
Right.
I don't know enough about it, but when you said that, you made me think, because La Durée is like the Parisian, but now it's everywhere.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Now it's everywhere. And when I developed our recipe, I specifically made it a little bit more almond flour, a little less sugar, because I find that some of the other macaroons out there are a bit too sweet.
Yes.
And that's why people didn't like them. And I don't know if it was a mix or always a mix because of the flavor combo, because lavender just might not be for everybody, or it was just because they really were so sweet. But I catered it to my liking, and thankfully, I think people agreed. Some people agreed.
Oh, 100%. And you obviously followed, too, what your gut intuition was.
Right. People thought I was crazy.
Yeah, I
Like,
read
do a
that.
bakery with like one thing.
God, I know. I want to ask you that because I read it in the interview as well that you said that, and I think probably anyone who's ever started a company or wants to start can relate to that. But what's okay? So Food 52 though, when was that? After or
Right, full
before?
circle. So Food 52 is my externship. So when you went to culinary school, you had to do an externship at the end. And so that basically means after your teachings, you work in an establishment, an approved establishment, and you just, you get the best experience, real life experience. Like you can learn whatever you want from being in class, but you're not going to understand speed, efficiency, organization until you go into the real world and you actually work in that type of environment. So I did fine dining, and I, worked in restaurants when I was in culinary school. I would have class during the day, and then when I would get out, I would do prep and do service nights and weekends. So it was really like getting home at 2 a.m, going to class at 7 a.m, like 24/7. That was my life. So I knew I didn't want to do an externship at a restaurant, but I have background in photo, and Food 52 is this amazing platform which has grown leaps and bounds since I was there. And I said, it's an online. It's this online community where real people are making recipes, posting recipes, and they're doing so many different things. And I said I need to do my externship there because it was the perfect marriage of photo and food, which is what I did. So I would go there and I would help them with all their photo shoots. I would help style the photo shoots, help with the photo shoot production, and cook the food. It was great.
I started my original blog back in 2011, and I remember Food 52, and thinking it's kind of
Amanda
like,
and Meryl, the best.
And it's like almost like the blogging version of a magazine, which
they were so ahead of their time.
Yeah,
right.
And now I believe Erica Nardini, who's at Barstool, I don't know if she's not the CEO now. I don't think.
My husband just sent me that article, but she's now going to be working with Food 52, which is awesome.
Which I find so interesting because obviously Barstool couldn't be further from food. Minus Dave Portnoy's like fetish for pizza reviews.
I mean, but like everyone knows the rules. Like I get it. You know, but
so I'm
very
intrigued.
different. But I'm sure she'll be great there.
But when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is awesome because it's an OG publication in a way, Food 52. But I do remember the photos were so beautiful. But when you were working in restaurants, were you bartending? What were you doing?
No, I was in the kitchen. Okay. So there was a pastry chef, Gustavo. He took me under his wing, and I opened up restaurants with him. He taught me all the real life experience. So I would do prep during the day. I would do service at night. And I was working in the kitchen in the dessert department, which is a whole nother beast.
A lot of people ask me if I've ever worked in restaurants or had a traditional job. It's not like I came from any money, but I never worked in restaurants or anything.
Right.
And it's hard. Everyone I know who does, it's like fucking terrible.
You know what it is? It's one of these things where it's not for the weak. It's like when it's the holiday and everyone's with their family, like you're serving other families. And it's grueling work. I mean, you're most likely usually in a basement with no windows and very close quarters. It's usually 1,000 degrees, and you're working with, crazies, everyone that works in the kitchen. There's a lot of different personalities and great ones and also crazy ones. And it's like a melting pot of all these different people. But, you're lugging, for me in pastry, you're lugging 70-pound bags of apples up like flights of stairs, and you're coring 700 apples for dessert service later on in the day. I mean, it's grueling work. The pay is not great usually until you work your way up, and it's not for everyone.
My sister used to work at coffee shop in Union Square. Well, now it's closed.
Right. I mean, I used to love that restaurant.
I know. I
right.
couldn't believe that
I
they
lived down the
closed
street
it.
from there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's so sad. But she would give me a lot of the stories. But they had this whole back door for the models because she was a model. So she was doing the modeling in the
all the models
in
worked
the restaurant.
there. Right.
Yep, back in the day. But what was the first restaurant you worked at?
So I helped open up Lexington Brass, which is part of EMM Group Catch, that whole restaurant group. And it was in a hotel in Midtown, and I helped open that restaurant, which was really cool because that's a great experience that you would never get anywhere else.
How did you get that job?
Gustavo.
Okay.
He took me under his wing, and he said, "We're doing this project. You're going to do it with me." And he was amazing.
Why you? Like, what do you think he saw in you? Because I feel like at this point now I'm really good at, I don't like scouting talent. Sometimes I see potential entrepreneurs and I don't think they're just going to be able to do it. And then I see other ones who are like, they seem to have the vibe. Yeah. So for you in the field of restaurants initially, what do you think sparked his eye?
I think that in order to make it in anything, you have to have a I don't give a fuck attitude. And it's not even necessarily like Nike, just do it. It is. But give zero fucks is something that I always say, because if you don't just try, what are you doing? And I it's nerve-wracking when you're still in culinary school and you go into this restaurant with all these chefs and you just walk in there and you say, "Hi, do you have anything for me? I'll start washing dishes. I don't care. I just want to get in and I want to learn." And I think he saw that, and he really took me under his wing. And because of him, I was able to really get that experience. Then also see that I didn't, later on, I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. I come from a very entrepreneurial family, and I knew that I kind of wanted to be my own boss in a sense and just do my own thing and pave my own path. But I gained so much experience from him and, just that whole portion of my learning, my teachings.
So you would say he's a mentor, or and was he kind of your main mentor for the original years of your career?
In the restaurant space. Yeah, in the restaurant space. And then when I went to ICE, when I was starting Dana's Bakery, there were some teachers, Chef Catherine, who really helped me figure out some of my recipes when I was struggling and I couldn't get something right, and they were very instrumental and really went above and beyond to help me. You have a community, and they really are there, and they want to see you succeed. And then what you do from there is up to you. But if you have those people around you and you're willing to ask for help, and you're willing to put in the work to make something happen,
Yeah. I interviewed Candace Nelson from Sprinkles, and it's very similar, the mindset I found of founders in this food space in particular, especially ones who went from even more traditional media backgrounds. She was in finance.
I was going to say she was in finance.
Yep, you were working in food photography, but still at a publication. And so it's very cool because there's just that gut intuition, it seems, that you both had that really made you do this. But I will say, on the topic of that particular item, cupcakes are so kind of easy in a way, right?
Right.
But macaroons, it's the one thing I've actually never tried. Every time I go home
Everyone's
for the holidays, I know, and it intimidates me.
Right.
I don't know why, because it seems so specific. But I also think it's really interesting to note that Dana's Bakery is gluten-free.
Right.
And that's not something that you lead with, and I get why, but macaroons are gluten-free as pretty much all the products you have.
Right, so we have a lot of products now, but when we started, it was just macaroons, and macaroons by nature are gluten-free, but you could easily make them not gluten-free by adding different flavorings and products to them. So I quickly saw that the gluten-free space, people were so appreciative. There's parents, there's people that have siblings where they just were never able to get a dessert that actually tasted good. So when we were expanding our flavor, just our flavor line and expanding our product line, I said, it's really important that we stay true to gluten-free because it's so easy to do. And then when we expanded our product line, I also didn't want to have to pay for a second kitchen. If you have gluten, you have to have two totally different setups. You can't mix them or else people could get sick. So it was also a business decision to keep everything gluten-free for the people who had come to depend on Dana's Bakery, but also just so that we can keep the expenses down.
But you're gluten-free or no?
I'm not gluten-free.
Because gluten-free is super expensive. So how did you keep the, even almond flour in particular, is like what 90% of your business is.
Right.
And that's a very expensive ingredient.
Yeah. So for cookies, we formulated our own flour because I didn't love any gluten-free flour on the market. So it took us about 1.5 to 2 years to come up with our own flour. And we use that for all of our non-macaroon related items. So like for black and white cookies and all of the stuffed cookies and things like that, that's all our own proprietary flour blend, which we also sell. And then for the macaroons, that's all almond flour. So, you figure out your costing. And that's why, when we were talking just before about, people in the food space, owning a business, especially in the food world, there's nothing, baking is very different than running a business. And I never went to business school. So for me, they're just two totally different things. And that was a huge learning curve for me. Every day I was learning something new, and I'm still learning something new because business is just different from creating and baking.
And I think it's also important.
Hence food costs and pricing and smart business decisions. And, it's some tough pills to swallow along the way while you learn.
Do you feel, though, any founder shouldn't be or can't really be good at everything? I mean, even myself, I've had to learn like the accounting and the bookkeeping and math. I hate that stuff. I'm not good at it. I'm fine to outsource 90% of that.
Well, that's exactly it. I think that a good founder, it's impossible to think that you can do everything yourself when you hit a certain level. Yeah. And the smartest founders, smartest CEOs and people in business are the ones that say, I'm going to hire you because you do this better than I do. And it's not about me or my ego. It's about wanting the business and the brand to be as great as it can be. And sometimes you need to bring people in who are better at doing things than you so that you can grow. Because how many times have you heard, companies fail because the founder got in the way, or they were the roadblock to having all these things become successes. And I would never want to be that for my business. I would never want to be the reason why my business failed.
I couldn't agree more. And I would even say a quick story as well. I was advising a startup earlier this year, and they were going to try and raise money, and they're in more of the clothing space, and they've got this massive following, 2 young founders. And I have to be honest, and I no longer work with them, but I could not get over the fact that they in particular were, I don't want to use the word narcissistic, but almost too like, it's the best, it's going to work. And I said, well, what if you got sued? What if something, that's never going to happen? And I just was like,
by the way, it always happens.
Yeah. And I was
always happens.
And I couldn't quite figure out what would make any founder be so like, because there's that certain line, right? Your product's amazing. You're the best founder to do it. But also always wanting to learn, always wanting to fall down. And to grow. And so I ultimately walked away from helping them because I thought, at some point something's going to blow up and I don't want to be a part of it. They could be making $1 million a month right now, but the minute shit hits the fan, I do not want to be associated because they don't know how to fall down and come back up.
And when you're public, not public in the sense of your business becoming public, but when you are a public entity or a public business, it's not really about you. You are serving customers and you are serving people, and it's really their interpretation. It's how they respond to you and your product and how they review, what you're putting out there. Someone could sue you because they say they had a problem with your product and it really wasn't your product. I mean, there's so many different things that could happen, but you just have to be prepared for all of it. And it's hard to do that by yourself. There's so many things that go into running a business and growing a business that you would never even comprehend if you had not done it yourself.
So you solo start Dana's, and you said you were bringing this around the city, and it was just macarons at the beginning.
Right. Yeah.
And how did you decide what flavors to do?
So I am always just inspired by things around me. And, it's the holidays. There's different candies and things like that. And because of social media, I would also engage people and in real time get people's opinions and ask them, take polls and things like that. So what started with macaroons, we had 12 core flavors, which we have most of them, the same core flavors, 13, however many years later. A couple of changes, like instead of just regular chocolate, we ended up making chocolate molten because we had a Valentine's Day box and people loved it. It was like full with the fudge in the middle. So we decided to make our chocolate molten. And there's been some variations of the core flavors, but they've really stayed the same. And I took some of those flavors away to switch it up, and people were livid. They were so upset that birthday cake was gone, and they were so upset. So what we did was we kept our core, and then we introduced rotating flavors of the month and things like that. And yeah, just it's an evolution. It's an ongoing process.
Of course. But that original like time frame, right? So how did you get any money how were you making this product? Were you at a commercial kitchen?
Yeah, so I started in an incubator kitchen, my mom, and the reason why headquarters, so I lived in the city at the time that Dana's Bakery started, and my mom is in New Jersey. And so my mom found me a test kitchen, and I went there 3 times a week. I had a couple of hours booked every week to work on my recipes and to work on my business. And then as we grew, I hired local people. So then fast forward a couple years later, we've now maxed out and taken over the whole entire building. I have a staff of whatever it was, 15 people, and they're all New Jersey locals. And then we outgrew that space. That's not true. We were on top of each other, but my landlord ended up kicking us out because he could get more rent if he split it up. And I was like 6 months pregnant with my first daughter, Lenny, and it was just about to be holiday, and I found out that we were getting the boot. So, very pregnant, about to go into our busiest quarter, and then I had to find a new facility and do all of that, very unprepared. But the incubator kitchen was great because I didn't have to invest in ovens, any equipment, anything like that. It was just scale up, scale down as I needed to. My walk-in fridge, freezers, everything was there. And that's a really great way to start a business without, depending on the industry. If you have a clothing company, you have to have inventory because you have to have something to sell. But for me, I didn't have to invest in my own equipment. I could do it out of an incubator kitchen and keep my expenses very low because of just the type of business that I had. And that's how I was able to start Dana's Bakery with like $5,000. I had it saved. And I just was able to take that and keep on reinvesting into the business as we grew, very like bootstrap, grassroots, because I didn't have the big investment or the big partners. And I was able to do it with an incubator kitchen and a very small nest egg.
Was there doubts at that time? Like this won't work or?
Yeah, of course.
And you were pregnant?
Not when I started,
Not when
but
you
a couple years
into it. Okay, because I was gonna say
we had grown at that point, and I had gone from me to, handfuls of employees, and at that point, I was married and pregnant, and a lot had happened from start to finish. We had wholesale accounts. We had our, we were sold Williams Sonoma, 1-800 Flowers, a bunch of different places. And by the way, those were all me going and knocking on doors and saying, just getting the meeting. Once I got the meeting, I knew once they tasted the product, they would like it, but it's a very expensive product compared to what they were used to because people didn't understand the concept of a macaroon, how hard it was to make. The cost of ingredients were so expensive because almond flour is like 7 times more expensive than all-purpose flour. So once you got that meeting and they tasted it, for example, Dylan's Candy Bar, we were their top-selling item in their cafe, all their cafes before we opened up shop there permanently. And I said, I understand that this one little 2-inch diameter macaroon is more expensive than your giant cupcake, but I'm going to give you the first order on me, and I want you to see how it sells. And if it does well, that's a gift, and we can, start working together. And it killed it.
Really?
And it sold out, and it did really well, and they brought me in. And then they brought me into all of their stores, and I developed that relationship, and that's how I grew that part of my business. But to go back to your question about Gustavo, what did he see in me, right? And what do you see in certain founders or people who are equipped or just have the capability to start their own business and grow their own business? And that is one of those things. You just kind of have to be hungry and knock down doors and get those meetings and just keep on going,
Of course.
to grow it.
Were you cold emailing some of those companies?
Yeah.
And do you remember what your pitch was?
Oh, God.
And how also would you find their email?
So LinkedIn is a beautiful thing. So you could, first of all, always hit up all your connections. Ask someone if they know someone, and most times they do. But because of the internet is a beautiful thing. Not only is it a treasure trove for memes and all these things, but you can find anyone on the internet. And LinkedIn, you can look up who the senior buyer at Williams-Sonoma is in this category or that category, and then you can Google what the email format is for Williams-Sonoma, and then you can send 5 different emails: first name, last initial.
You're my twin. This
first
is all
name,
I tell people
period,
about all
last
day.
name, and you just do that. And then once you find it, because you can find someone else that works there, and if you Google, an email address will show up, and then you just use that format. And if it bounces back, who cares? Try another one.
Do you mind if I ask as well, when you said to ask somebody to introduce you?
Yeah.
I also agree with that. And a lot of people, either are too scared to cold email, but also don't want to ask someone for an intro. So what is like a quick Dana-proof sentence to send to a LinkedIn contact who perhaps knows you or me or whatnot to get an intro?
I think it depends. It depends if your business is already, up and running or not. You could just say, depending on how well you know the person, hey, Chris, I'm looking to get in touch with someone at Williams-Sonoma. I see that you're connected to this person. Do you know them well enough where you're comfortable making an introduction? Something along those lines, very non-intrusive or aggressive, but just kind of testing the waters just to say, hey, do you have a connection and are you comfortable? The worst you can do is ask. And I always say that it always comes around. How many times have you helped someone without expecting anything back, just because? And then maybe 5 years down the road, you're looking for something and you just now have that communication and it's open and you can always go, and I'm a reference, you're a reference, and I feel comfortable going to you and vice versa. I'm just that way in life. I feel like it's always just great to meet people and make connections. You never know what will happen, but you can't do it with an ulterior motive or an agenda. I'm doing it because I want to get to know you as a person, and we now have this relationship, and we'll stay in touch, and who knows, our paths will cross at another time when they're meant to, and maybe there's a reason.
I'll also say, I would add on that, if you don't know the person too well, sometimes I like to even be like, I'm happy to introduce you to anyone as well in my network that can be a fit. Because I would assume you have had too. I've had people reach out, I haven't spoken to in 10 years.
Right.
Hey, do you know anyone? I saw you were at Disney. Do you know anyone there? And I'm like, I know, that makes me super uncomfortable. But if they were to add on there, I'm happy to introduce you as well to perhaps. Perfect. But for me to do that for someone I just don't really know that well.
But also, I would never vouch for someone that I don't know either, because they're a reflection of me. So sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not. And you could also just offer them macarons. I'd be like, listen, and I'd love to send you a package.
Exactly. I will do that. I'll send a handwritten card. Sometimes I'll send flowers.
Yes.
It depends on what came from that situation.
Or how big or small it is.
For sure.
Right.
But that's very important. You were quoted in an interview saying that everyone thought you were crazy when you went to pursue entrepreneurship. And of course, that's not the first time. I felt like that. Every founder has. So your original early days, your friends, family, I think you had a boyfriend at the time. Yeah. What was the thought process?
If it's something that's unknown and people aren't comfortable with it, they're always going to be a little resistant. It's just human nature, I think. And people, I went to school for a different career. I had worked in a different career for over a decade, and people were like, what, you're going to quit your job and you're going to make cakes for people and you're just going to sell one thing? And I said, yeah, because if it doesn't work out, then at least I tried. And at the time, my mom was the one person who truly, and she's always believed in me. And
is she in food?
She's not in food. She's not in food. But even when I was little, I would want to do little businesses, and she would always support me, and she would, help me get the product sample of the bag made, or help me do this and that. And she helped me set up my LLC, and she helped me find my test kitchen. And, she really believed in me, and you just need one person, really yourself. But it's nice to have that one person. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. But let me start with one thing. Let me do it really well, and then I'm just going to take it day by day. And now in hindsight, I look back and I see that I wasn't just doing one product. I was building a brand. And one of the things that I think sets Dana's Bakery apart from a lot of other companies, a lot of people are making macaroons and fun flavors. And a lot of people are gluten-free. And I have a lot of people on Instagram who rip off everything that we do and block me so I can't see or comment on it. I mean, it's everywhere. But you can recreate whatever you want, but you will never recreate a brand and a brand following and a feel and a vibe and all the things that are Dana's Bakery are what really set us apart from everyone else. And I was building that because it's not just about a cookie. It's really about a brand, a community, a following, an engaged following, and just, making memories and connections with that.
So interesting, because I think of that as well, like looking back to even when I started, and I'm not obviously in food, more of like the personal brand space and this Be Fearless community that I have. All of these building blocks were towards this Alexa Curtis brand, but I was dabbling and trying a podcast and a website.
Right, and you were figuring it out.
Would you say that was the same for Dana's at the beginning? Like, did you know when you started, this is going to be a brand? Or were you just like, I'm just going to make macaroons, see if they sell, if we can work, and then go from there?
I knew I needed a brand, but the brand to me, in hindsight, I see it very differently, but the brand to me was my logo. And it was, we are not your ordinary macaroon. You're not your ordinary bakery. I never said Dana's Macaroons, I said Dana's Bakery. We are not your ordinary bakery. We color outside the lines. Like, I didn't want to do anything that anyone else was doing. And so people love La Durée, but they would come to us for customs and custom colors because La Durée would not make a blue cotton candy macaroon for them. They're like, this is what we do and this is our brand. And so it was really easy to kind of expand the product line because I had already identified who we were, and I think that that's really important. And just as you consult, I consult and I tell people who are starting or making a brand, you have to find out what makes you you, because there is a ton of other people that could be selling macaroons. Ooh, my ring just made the loudest noise. Yeah. Rewind. There could be a ton of people selling macaroons, but what's going to make someone come to you? What's going to make you stand out from everyone else? And that's the key indicator, the most important thing of starting a business, I think.
This business is successful. So do you ever feel crazy still?
All the time, every day.
And how do you?
But I love my crazy.
Yeah.
It is very much a part of who I am, and I kind of let it all hang out. Like, if you follow me on Instagram, especially in my personal, you will see I am just as crazy in real life. Fun, I would say, as I am there, and it kind of filters into the brand. You can see it in different places.
Also, quick note as well.
I keep on pointing to the cookbook.
No,
it's just because it's right there.
Well, and there's some amazing accolades on the back as well. Shay Mitchell, who's literally one of my favorite actresses. I mean, she acknowledged this book. Darcy Miller. So that is just some incredible people. How did you get this brand in front of some of these bigger players in the world?
I think that we have been very fortunate to work with a lot of great clients. A lot of people will come to us to create customs and things like that. Like, we did macaroons for Jerry Seinfeld. Shay Mitchell, she saw us on Instagram, and we ended up creating a custom Shay Mitchell flavor for her. It was a salted caramel. It was really pretty. It was like pink with gold sparkles. And I actually flew to LA because I love LA. So any chance I have to go out there, I will go. And we did a macaroon making video in her house. Like, we made content together, and life is wild, and if you're open to just receiving what opportunities come your way, be selective, of course, but it's crazy where it'll take you. And I just think that every day we have new opportunities, and things develop from those. It's so much fun.
I love that, kind of that abundance, open mindset. It's nice.
If you're open to it, it'll come. I mean, there's so many people that have roadblocks, and they, again, get in their own way. Speaking of founders and people just inhibiting their own success.
I'd like to get your opinion now on the overall CPG space so far, and because of what just happened with this company. Also to mention as well, Dana's has gone through a merger, not an acquisition. And I was unaware, actually, that there is such a difference between mergers and acquisitions. So first question for you is, in the CPG space, and I would say for those who don't know, Foxtrot in particular was this marketplace in Chicago, Austin, Texas, that was like, all these $14 hot sauces.
But they catered to very small, very, very small business. They were very small business friendly. And I think that that's why this is making such a splash, is because it just, all of a sudden, like midday, just closed. No one had any idea that it was having any trouble. And a lot of people depended on that resource, right, for their livelihood and to get their brands out and to make money. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's
just
okay.
adding to it.
Yeah, but someone also wrote on this video as well that, what did they say? Oh, what does this have to, or does this have something to do with the future of CPG? And I know Dana's is not necessarily like CPG brand.
Right.
And for those who don't know, a CPG brand is basically like if you're at Whole Foods and you're in,
Supermarket shelves,
Yeah.
big box stores, things like that.
But there are some of these crazy CPG brands that have blown up, and they're
Right.
like I said, the hot sauce, and we've got like $15 chocolate bars and all of this. And I think because of social media, it is just completely ballooned. I mean, no one, I don't think 10 years ago would have thought that anyone would buy like mayonnaise that's
TikTok shop.
ridiculous.
Right.
So do you think that there's anything that has to do with this space being so saturated and a bit ridiculous right now?
Well, do you think that it is that things like TikTok shop are phasing out the middleman retailer? Or do you think that it was a company that had a concept, got very large investment, and then kind of lost who they were? And
Actually.
I think it's a mix of both.
Yeah.
I think that, from the feedback that I got and just the little bit that I know diving in, I think that they had a concept and then they started bringing in bigger brands maybe to pay their bills. And no one really knows what happens behind closed doors. You don't know when a company is struggling. You don't know if they're profitable or not. You don't know any of those things. So for companies to get such large investments, have huge valuations, and open up locations, and you just don't know. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it of what it could be that led to their demise. And by the way, it was very sudden. It wasn't like anyone had any. It's not like Bed Bath & Beyond where you knew that they were struggling and then they had like fire sales. It was people were in the store that day and then asked to leave because it shut.
Yeah, which is wild. But I think there's so much to be said about like this current fundraising market and being a brand and these YC-backed companies. And you don't even realize it's insane just because a brand, Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, I don't know if you know that store. I'm like fascinated by it. But I mean, look, it didn't even work. The product didn't work, but invested millions of dollars.
Right.
And so a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. Like you just don't know. But I'm curious, where do you go to find new brands? Like if you, are you at the grocery store? If you're like, oh, I want to find a product for, I don't know, you want to make something new or whatnot. Where are you finding brands?
I mean, honestly, it's either word of mouth or it's the internet. I go down, I lay in bed and I'm on that rabbit hole. I'm down in the bottom of the, and I'm like, okay, 10 minutes and then I'm going to bed, and then it's 2 hours later and I'm like, I am still scrolling and I'm looking, and this is one of those things where, I forget what we were talking about earlier and where I was thinking about this, but we're talking about TikTok, right? And we're talking about people, maybe it was when people, and you might want to cut this all together, but maybe it's people about how having to need social media. We were talking about how Foxtrot closed and a lot of people depended on Foxtrot to sell their brand and get their brand out there. If they ban TikTok, people have built brands on TikTok. What happens when that goes away and your main form of income or selling your product is gone? And I was thinking about people who sell at Foxtrot. You never want to have all of your eggs in one basket, right? You never want that to be your end all be all and all of your orders are there. If you have an established business and you're selling anywhere, okay, use that to keep the lights on, but don't give up looking for other revenue streams. Don't, give up looking for other stores to sell in or other ways to sell, because what if that goes away? You know what I'm saying? It's like influencers, right? How many influencers do you know that now have their own business ventures because they needed to find other ways to make income, because it's inevitable that over time things change. And that got saturated, and that wasn't probably as lucrative as it was because so many people were quote unquote influencers. So you needed to have other ways to bring in money, creating your own clothing lines, getting into home and lifestyle, making new products and using your influence to sell those things where you make money in a different way rather than just getting sponsored from other brands to post. It's just the evolution of everything. And I think, to bring it full circle, that might have hurt Foxtrot because there's so many other different places where people are now finding product and cutting out that middleman. They take a percentage.
I say this all the time to people who want to be influencers or whatnot. Like, if you rely on the internet to pay your bills, even if you go viral, it really doesn't mean anything. And that's why, I mean, I have a podcast, I have the newsletter. If the internet went away, I would still have business. But that took 10 years. And so I think a lot of these young people, they think in that way, like, I'm going to go viral on TikTok. Or imagine if Dana's was just, you were just selling on Instagram.
Well, here's the thing, right? Instagram was the number one driver of my sales. What if Instagram goes away? And that's why it was really important for me to have a strategic partner, which I now have, to have other revenue streams, whether it's corporate or it's events or it's gifting and it's other product that can be CPG, like my flour, kits, things like that. You never want to back yourself into a corner where everything can just go away because the trends are changing, because the trends will always change. As a founder, as a CEO, you have to have the capability to think 10 steps ahead. And if you need help getting there, at least pinpoint what it is that you want to do and then find someone to help you.
So, and feel free to get as into it as you want. But I guess what I would like to know first is, what is the difference between a merger and an acquisition?
So an acquisition is essentially when a company is bought out, right? Someone acquires your company and it's no longer yours. A merger is when two companies merge to make a new company.
And why would a company want to merge to make a new company?
Because they either want to have or retain some of the assets that the old company has, whether it's the founder, whether it's you're trying to. I'm trying to think about the best way to explain it. This might take some editing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about the best way to explain it. So for me, I was looking for a very strategic partner. I was not just looking for an investment. If I had an investment, it could be an angel, it could be just getting money, and then I would need to still figure out how to get someone in place to help me strategically. I wanted a strategic partner who was going to help me with operations. So I was looking for someone who specialized in operations and other revenue opportunities that could merge with Dana's Bakery to help us grow and bring us under their umbrella. And so that's what I did.
Got it. Interesting.
So that's the true sense, of a merger. And by the way, the merger could be where two companies then start a new company and it's a totally different name. Mine is still Dana's Bakery, although things behind the curtain have changed. But to the public, it's still very much Dana's Bakery. It's just going to be a very bigger, better, stronger Dana's Bakery. And I won't be doing everything myself.
So when a company or when a founder, and I think at this point, everyone's like, I just want to get acquired. But there's so much, I know so many founders that happens to. I mean, we even look at people have bought their companies back. Like the founder of Create and Cultivate, she bought hers back. Dave Portnoy bought Barstool back.
Right.
So is that something that's in the future for Dana's that you would want to do?
No, because I didn't sell it and I'm not involved. I merged and now I'm very much involved, but I get to do all the things that I love. I have the backing and the partners to help me achieve more goals. And I think that that's the difference. And that was really important to me. Money, and I say this, but in context, money is easy to get. It's not necessarily about getting money. For me, it was about not wanting to walk away from my brand and wanting my brand to grow to the potential I knew that it had. And I was able to have an honest conversation with myself and say, I've been able to get it here in this amount of time, and that's great. I know that it could go here. Can I get it there myself? And if I can't, what would that take and what kind of people would I need in my corner? And that, just goes back to the point where I said, you need to know, can you take it there? And if you can't, what will it take to get there? And who do you need to bring on to make that happen?
What is the future of Dana's? So you started in 2012, now it's 2024.
Yeah.
You just went through a merge. Where do you want this to go?
Oh man, we are nowhere near.
You're already there.
We are nowhere near done. There's so much to do on a personal and on a business level. There's going to be product expansion, coming out with new products, still with the Dana's Bakery spin. We will be available in a lot of other capacities.
Stores more?
Stores, in other areas online. We're just expanding left and right. New cookbook coming out fall of 2025, which I'm really excited about.
Love
it. And like I said, opportunities come every day. Some great partnerships, some great product expansion. just more visibility, and, you know, you're going to be seeing a lot more of us.
Where can everyone find you and Dana's Bakery online?
So you can find us on our website, danasbakery.com. We're also very active on social, Instagram, Dana's Bakery, and then, of course, my own personal, it's Dana Pollack, which they kind of go very hand in hand together.
I love your personal. I love it's
Thank
like
you.
real life. It's so nice to see like a successful person, right? But then like, you know, you have kids and you're like,
Right.
you don't just sit and make macaroons all
It's
day
the
and like
juggle.
look pretty.
It's real.
Yeah. And
It's
so
real.
it's really nice. So
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. This was such a treat.
This is one of my favorite convos. And to everyone who watched and listened, thank you so much.